I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Podcorn, for sponsoring this episode. Check out sponsorship opportunities and start monetizing your podcast today by signing up at podcorn.com/podcasters. Podcorn is a super easy way to monetize your podcast, and it was truly a no-brainer for me. You see, Podcorn makes it super easy to work with sponsors. They have a marketplace that allows you to interact with potential sponsors, which is super intuitive to use. You can choose from host-read ads, guest interviews, topical discussions, and more. I've been working with Podcorn for about 9 months now, and I've already had 7 different show sponsors. With Podcorn, there's no middleman. I'm able to set my own rates and work directly with sponsors. The best thing is, podcasters of all sizes can browse and choose opportunities right on the platform. You don't lose any of the rights to your podcast, and Podcorn supports you the entire time. With the marketplace, you have access to brands, and Podcorn provides transparency, creative freedom, and full control of how and when you have ads in your show. Click the link in my show notes to sign up for Podcorn today and find the perfect sponsorship for you. That's podcorn.com/podcasts. True Consequences is a proud member of the Borellis Podcasters Guild.
The Oracle Network.
The Oracle Network.
Look deeper.
True Consequences is a true crime and mystery podcast with stories based in New Mexico and the American Desert Southwest. I'm your host, Eric Carter-Landin. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another episode of True Consequences. I'm your host, Eric Carter-Landin, and I am so grateful for all of my listeners. I just hit a massive milestone of 90,000 downloads, which I never thought was going to be possible. So I am forever grateful for you and for your listens, your shares, and your reviews, even the bad ones. But I need to give some shout outs. So I want to say thank you to Maggie, my newest patron subscriber, as well as Mind of Madness podcast, and Lala, who bought me a coffee on Ko-Fi. Again, if you want to support this one-man show, go to patreon.com/True Consequences or ko-fi.com/True Consequences. I know that there was a lot of controversy about Lydia, and it's so funny that the timing worked out that a Lydia episode was dropping literally 2 days after that review came in. I hope you guys enjoyed that. All my favorite Crow listeners, hopefully you love Lydia as much as I do. She's been a huge part of my life for many years, and I think she's just an amazing person, and I love her cackle. So if you don't like her cackle and you don't like my show, feel free to unsubscribe and go find something that suits your sensibilities. But if you're still here with me, I appreciate you, I love you, and I am so grateful for all your support. I'm bringing another special guest today who has some insider information and some things that we didn't cover in the last episode related to Girly Chew. And it's somebody that you might remember. Her name is Edna. She was on 2 of Jacob's episodes, and she was on another episode about Patricia Platero. So, Edna, welcome back to the show. How are you today?
I am great, Eric, and I'm really, really, really happy to be here.
I'm happy that you're here too, and I'm glad that you decided to come back on the show. So, I know you have some insider information, but is there anything that you want to say before we jump right into Girly Chew's follow-up case?
Sure. I want to tell everyone to, and this includes myself, to go subscribe to your show on Patreon, because there are probably lots of people who maybe think that we don't need to subscribe to you because we're your friend, but we should also give you money. Because I just offered to give you money and you said no.
Yeah.
So do it legitimately on all of your platforms so that we can make sure that you can continue to do this show. And also, I love Lydia as well. And so I will, my laugh isn't quite as much fun as hers, but
no.
we'll have fun today, I hope.
Not as cackly, for sure.
No.
When I approached Lydia about this case, I was like, this thing is insane. I can't believe you've never heard of it. You need to start researching it right now, because it's right up her alley. You know, she loves all these crazy conspiracy people, and she likes to troll people on Twitter. So this is the perfect case for her to cover. And then when you reached out to me and said that you had some connections to it, I got really excited because, first of all, I love having you on. You're a lot of fun to talk to, and I'm just super excited to hear what you have to say about what happened. So if you can, give us a little bit of background about your connection to the case, and then we'll jump into the crazy stuff.
Okay. So I just want to say that one of the blessings of being a New Mexican and even living in New Mexico, if you're not from here, is that eventually you begin to realize that our degrees of separation are even less than Kevin Bacon said that they were. And that I call it the movidos of New Mexico, which who knows if that's even a word or a term, but we all have these really crazy connections. Mm-hmm. And I love that stuff because to me, it provides context for everything that you encounter in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And so then you have this really crazy, in a bad way, case involving Girly Chu Hossencofft. Mm-hmm. And I am stunned, frankly, that Lydia did not know about it. How did she not know about it?
She claims that she was too young, but I mean, she was a high schooler, so it was everywhere. Maybe she just wasn't paying attention.
Do you remember it?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you guys are from Socorro.
Right.
So, of course, Magdalena is
right there.
Same county, spitting distance.
Yeah. We used to go there all the time, for family. I have family in Magdalena. We would go to Water Canyon, which is right there. We were always on that highway. So it was very close to home. That, there's so many cases like that are so close to Socorro. And I think that's why I remember it. Plus, I was a senior in high school. So
you're a little bit more mature than Lydia.
I still am.
Me too.
Yeah. And I think, too, my mom was kind of intrigued by the whole case too, so she and I probably talked about it as well.
Well, and given your family's history and experiences with domestic violence, mm-hmm. the horror of that story would be something that would certainly be in the minds of victims of domestic violence, just in terms of the relation to themselves and their experiences.
Yeah, because
domestic violence is really so similar across mm-hmm. socioeconomic, racial lines. Many victims experience the same things. In fact, just as we're sitting here, I recall your mother experiencing strangulation, mm-hmm. which Girly Chu did mm-hmm. as well. Mm-hmm. So I can imagine that would have been something that your mom would have even remotely paid attention to. Yeah,
well, and then you look at the similarities between my mom's ex-husband and Diaizien. He wasn't pretending to be a doctor. My mom's ex-husband, he wasn't pretending to, cure cancer or have a youth serum or any of those crazy things, but he did have a personality that he presented to the world that was completely different from the person that he actually was, which is exactly how Diaizien was.
Well, and is how a lot of domestic violence offenders are, that, they hide behind this public persona so that other people say, there's no way that person could have behaved that way. Mm-hmm. And really the mark of a truly successful batterer is the person who's never in question, who's never being reported to the police for committing these acts. Same with child sex offenders. Mm-hmm. And so again, I can imagine that that's very triggering to any victim, regardless of who they are or what their experience was, because that is the pathology of abuse, the pathology of gaslighting, the pathology of this kind of behavior that, in my opinion, makes it more criminal in some ways, but certainly more endemic of problems between men and women and in domestic violence situations.
Yeah, and I think having done this show for 3 seasons now and looking at so many cases in New Mexico, this one really struck a chord with me as an adult looking back at it, because I knew about it and I remembered it, but now looking back with all this information that I have now and all the things that I've learned through the show, it really broke my heart. Like, I felt so bad for Girly, because from all accounts, she was a lovely human being who really wanted to make a life and have a family, and she trusted the wrong person. And because of that, she suffered a horrible fate. And it's just the same story that we see over and over again. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter that she's from another country and that she moved here. None of that matters. At the end of the day, she's a human being who put her faith in the wrong person and trusted the wrong person, and that resulted in her death. And so as I was looking at the case and I was reading the book and everything that I did, it just broke my heart to think about her and to think about how scary and horrifying it must have been for her to realize that this person she thought she knew that she loved was not who he said he was. And she, she did everything right, but she also wasn't afraid to stand up to him and to call out his bullshit and to go and meet his women that he was seeing and tell them that he was married. Like, that takes some cojones,
Particularly in that time frame. I mean, it was only 22 years ago, approximately now.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, it's amazing how much has changed and how little has changed.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like society's changed, technology's changed, but we still have this problem happening.
And we still have the systems in place that allow for them to happen. I was struck by something you said just now, which is hope, right? I think you and I have talked about this before, about how easy it is to, and human and lovely about humans, that we have hope and sort of undying belief in love and in the people that we let into our lives, and how tragic it is when that goes horribly wrong. And then I was also struck with the fact that I actually looked up the criminal history and looked up the domestic violence case that had occurred prior to the homicide, and that was the basis of the domestic violence order of protection that she sought. And I have some insight into that too, just as a former prosecutor that I'm.
Oh, that'll be interesting to hear.
Yeah.
So, okay, so you
I was going to give you the context.
Yes, give me the context.
So I've said this before, but for those of you listening, I'm a lawyer. I'm from Albuquerque, and I graduated from law school in 2001. I moved back to New Mexico in 2001, took the bar, passed the bar, and in 2002, when I was a brand new baby lawyer, I was out looking for jobs. And I wanted to do family law because that was the kind of law that my dad did. He was a family law attorney, but he was not the kind of attorney who would ever have said to me, or he wasn't the kind of human who ever would have said to me, like, you probably shouldn't go there or do this. That's a bad idea. He was like, go for it. Let's see what happens. Which maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. So I was looking for a job. I had student loans out the wazoo, and I saw a posting in the bar bulletin, because I don't think we even used the internet really back then, but I found a job posting for a law firm called Garcia, Kelly and Associates, and it was paying like $45,000 or $50,000 a year, which was a lot in 2002. And here was the real kicker. The ad said that the firm owned this is so cheesy, not a beauty salon, but a day spa. And that with employment, that whoever the employee was, would get free massages whenever we wanted. And so
that wasn't a red flag for you?
Right. I mean, looking back, if it had said like manicures, I probably would have been suspicious. But I thought, well, how great. She's diverse and diverse in terms of her business holdings and values self-care.
Okay.
This is good. And her office and the day spa were right down the street from where I was living at the time, which was downtown.
That's very convenient.
Yeah. Anyway, so I go to her office, and it's my first job interview, and I've worked for law firms before, and so I dressed up and I go in, and she's the owner of the firm. So frequently attorneys, even solo practitioners, will name their firms, Doe and Associates, as though there are more than one.
Right.
So her firm was called Garcia, Kelly and Associates. Well, I didn't realize that
it was just her.
It was just her. And so she was not there, though, to interview me.
Okay.
A man who was then her husband, I won't say his name because he's still practicing law, and he was actually a very fine human being. He was the person that interviewed me, but he was in law school. So here I was, being interviewed for a legal job by not a lawyer. So I guess that would be now red flag number 2, as you've said.
Red flag number 2, got it.
Or 3 or 4. So I go to work for her, and I got a beautiful office, and they bought me wonderful business cards, and 40 some odd $1,000 and a day spa, and
That's a great out of law school job,
great
right?
out of law school job. Beautiful office, like red velvet, like very opulent, and I thought I'd landed jam side up. And so Felisa was quite a character. She was used to be a DJ on 97.3 Kiss FM back, or it may not have been 97.3, but on one of the like hip hop stations in the 90s
or something. Yeah.
Whatever the equivalent was in the 90s. She was from Albuquerque.
Okay.
And she would blast Eminem in the office, and I thought that was really cool. And she would send me down the street to the massage parlor. And I did not go to law school in New Mexico.
Okay.
So this was in 2002. So I had never heard of Girly Hossencofft or Diaizien Hossencofft. And she started to talk to me about this client of hers who had killed his wife. And I was under the impression that it had occurred much earlier than 1999.
Sure.
I didn't realize that, in fact, a lot of it was actually the litigation anyway was going on while I was working there. I just figured that out last week or this weekend. So she would tell me that she knew where the body was.
Oh my God.
Or knew what happened to the body. She would tell me a little bit about the child and about the fact that she and her husband, then husband, they divorced actually later, that they had considered, and it seemed seriously to me, adopting
Dimitri.
And I was a new lawyer, so I did not realize the ethical implications of this exactly, but it definitely struck me. And I recall her multiple times talking about being under a grand jury investigation into her role in the homicide as an attorney who was his divorce lawyer, and who I never knew how much the police knew that she supposedly knew what had happened to the body, because I was not the precocious person I am now, so I wasn't going to grill her. But I remember her telling me that she was under grand jury investigation, and that police, the courts, I'm not sure who, the ethics board of this disciplinary board, were trying to breach the attorney-client privilege in order to force Felisa to testify about
him.
Well, right. Or even if she didn't testify against him, to tell them what had happened to her body.
Okay. There is so much to unpack here.
Yes.
So this is part of the case that I did not cover in the episode with Lydia, mostly because it all was so crazy. And so it's not that I didn't believe Mark, because I think Mark really had probably every document and everything that you could imagine. But it just seems so out there, this relationship that he had with his divorce attorney.
That Diaizien had with his divorce attorney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems so far off. And I was like, I didn't really feel like I could weave that into the story in the way that I was telling it, because it was just kind of like off to the side while everything else is happening. So I'm glad you reached out to me to tell me about this connection you have. I have, as you can imagine, so many questions.
Well, and I'll answer them, but what I did not know, of course, she did not say to me, "Oh, I'm also sleeping with him," or whatever that dynamic was, because she was married, for one thing. Not that I don't care if you're married, and I don't take a moral,
it's not your
ethical
business
position. But later, when I went to work at the DA's office and people found out that I had worked for her, people wanted to know if I knew about the investigation into her, which occurred, I believe, after he had been arrested and everything, sometime after.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when one of the district attorneys I worked with told me that Felisa had been seen inappropriately kissing, making out, more than just a kiss, with Diaizien Hossencofft after he was charged on video while he was at the Metropolitan Detention Center in one of the, I think, attorney-client rooms. And so that knowledge also was part of the reason why the district attorney and the police were trying to force her to talk and saying attorney-client privilege doesn't apply.
So is that true that since they were romantically involved, that would nullify the attorney-client privilege? Maybe.
I mean,
such a lawyer answer.
Yeah,
maybe.
What nullifies the attorney-client privilege is the attorney's complicity in the criminal acts. Okay. So, and the privilege can only be waived by the client.
Got it.
Under most circumstances.
Okay.
What that means is that the privilege is one-sided. The client is the one who holds the confidentiality privilege, and I cannot waive it under any circumstance.
Unless they say you can.
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
And I can waive it somewhat in the process of representation because you have to speak in court, but the court cannot compel me to disclose attorney-client privilege. There are certain circumstances.
You can hold things back as part of the privilege.
Yes.
As you see fit. Or as your client sees fit.
So if my client tells me something that is a bad fact about them, and then they tell me you cannot disclose it,
you can't.
I cannot disclose it. So, and the exceptions to that are anything in which I'm a mandatory reporter. So, for example, I am a mandatory reporter when it comes to child abuse. So if my client comes in and discloses to me that she just put her cigarette out on her child's leg, I am a mandatory reporter. I am required to disclose that to Children, Youth, and Families. However, if I know that Children, Youth, and Families is already investigating her for that, I do not have to disclose that admission.
Got it.
The other circumstance is if I know, if you come in to me and you give me $1 and say, I'm hiring you as my lawyer, and you say, Edna, as soon as I leave your office, I'm going to go kill my neighbor, I then have a duty to report because I cannot assist you in the furtherance of a crime. And so where the situation with Mr. Hossencofft and his lawyer centered was whether or not she knew prior to the homicide that this was going to occur. So the fact that she may have known where the body was after does not a crime make.
Right.
Or does not a forced disclosure of or breaking of the attorney-client privilege make. So I'm allowed to know all kinds of horrible facts, but if I didn't have anything to do in the commission of those facts, I don't have to disclose.
But I also could see it from the side of the investigators and the police of, well, let's just try and see if she caves, if we put some pressure on her. You know, maybe she will, maybe she won't. She doesn't necessarily have to, but we might as well just give it a shot if she's claiming she knows where the body is. Let's see.
Well, the thing is that my memory is that everybody knew that she knew what had happened to the body.
She was telling people.
Well, yeah, she told me. Yeah.
She was telling anybody who would listen.
Which to me is audacious. I mean, Why would you invite that kind of like bad karma, attention,
right?
Negative juju? Like, why would I mean? I've never been a criminal defense lawyer, but when I have people tell me really horrible things, I don't want to have anything to do with it, and right. I certainly would not go around and be like, "Hey, I know where the body is." Because that's just bad juju. Like,
well, and that was one of the things that really struck me about when I read about her was that she was just going around just telling everyone and openly talking about the fact that her and her husband were thinking about adopting Dimitri.
Was she?
Yeah.
I didn't know that part.
All of that stuff was kind of out in the open. At least it seemed like according to Mark's book. And that just was like, wow, that just seems crazy because she's his attorney in this the crazy divorce. Let's take a quick break. Today's episode is brought to you by Free Lunch Coffee. Hey everyone, you probably know by now that I'm always looking for ways to make a difference in the world. I'm especially working super hard to help make a difference in the lives of children. And child hunger is a huge issue that I care deeply about. I'm also super addicted to caffeine and delicious coffee, and I found the perfect way to help kids while getting my morning caffeine fix. How is this possible? Well, I'm excited to introduce you to an amazing brand called Free Lunch Coffee. They are on a mission to end child hunger, and they have an awesome way for people to help their mission. When you buy just one bag of Free Lunch Coffee, you're also providing 10 meals to children in need. And Free Lunch Coffee gives away 50% of the money they make to end hunger in the lives of young children. How cool is that? The coffee is specialty grade, certified organic, and fair trade, and let me tell you, it's delicious. They offer 100% money-back guarantee for 30 days. If you don't absolutely love their coffee, they will give you a full refund, and you get to keep the coffee too. You really have nothing to lose. They also have some really cool and clever custom-made mugs and tumblers. And remember, every purchase from Free Lunch Coffee provides 10 meals to children in need. Free Lunch Coffee is offering a 10% discount to all my listeners, so you can try their delicious coffee. Use coupon code TRUECONSEQUENCES at checkout. Check it out today at freelunchcoffee.com. And we're back. Bound, it seemed like he was bound and determined to stop Girly from getting anything in the divorce, and he was willing to kill her to make sure that that happened. But, you know, she didn't know that the child was his actual biological son. She had no idea. Girly had no idea.
She didn't
know. And so, you know, I've heard people speculate, well, if she had known that, she might not have tried to fight for custody of him. I don't know if that's true or not.
Well, but I read the divorce petition, and what's really interesting about the divorce petition is she alleges, she speaks about the child as though he is a natural child.
For her or for him?
Both of
for
them.
Both
like,
of them.
It just says, like, there is one child of the marriage, his name, his age.
Well, and so I would say
which, and let me just say that, which so I've represented parents, in cases where they are not the biological or adoptive parent of a stepchild. And the law is mixed on whether or not those people are entitled to parental rights. So I, as a lawyer, if a client came to me and said, look, this child is not my biological child. I did not adopt this child, but I want parental rights. I would not file a divorce petition as though that child were my clients, because that's a misrepresentation to the court.
Right.
And she was represented.
So her attorney didn't make that distinction in the filing. Okay.
And maybe they didn't know.
Maybe. I mean, I know that she loved Dimitri, and she was so excited whenever Diaizien brought him home that, you know, she immediately welcomed him into her life and took care of him and treated him like if he were her own child. And
which is admirable, but that just blows my mind. How do you not? If my husband came home with a baby and was like, "Here,"
you'd be like, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, who the fuck did you kill? That would be my question.
Yeah.
Who the fuck did you kill to take this baby?
Yeah, I feel like, and I'm only speculating here. I don't know what her mindset was, but I would imagine that not knowing fully the laws here in this country,
sure,
trusting her husband,
sure, hope.
Right. Probably all of those. And then also being so desperate to want to be a mother because she wasn't capable of having children. I think it might have been easy to just kind of like let that be and be okay with it. Even though, you know, there's no formal adoption that happens. There's no paperwork that she signed. There's none of this happened. So it's heartbreaking for Dimitri and for her.
Yeah. Truly.
Yeah, and Diaizien's just a piece of shit for doing any of the things that he did.
I mean, it is next level.
Yeah.
Like gaming, like, hold my beer or whatever. Like it is next level.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's crazy. Well, and the other thing that was crazy about Felisa is that she had a child who...
It seemed to me like she was openly discussing the fact that she potentially could adopt this child. I don't know if that's the case or not, but with the way that she was talking about knowing where the body was, it wouldn't surprise me that she would just be like blabbing about all of this.
Well, and to me, that is unethical.
Yeah.
Lawyering, right?
Yeah.
Like you might want to get that close to your clients, but you should not ever. I mean, you should not sleep with them. You should not adopt their children.
Yeah.
You should not,
you shouldn't buy their youth serum.
Right. Like there's just, and it's so interesting to me because Felisa was married.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like I said, he's still around, but I wonder, I mean, I remember thinking, oh, well, they got divorced because she's such a quirky personality, but...
She's told you that she knows where the body is.
Yes.
And she told you that she's under investigation.
Yes.
And indictment. Not indictment. Just investigation.
Just under investigation. And the impression that... So I got the impression that she was the target of a grand jury.
Okay.
So I think I've talked about this before, but I'll just kind of loosely, little civics refresher.
Oh yeah, you did cover this.
So grand jury proceedings are secret, and the way that one knows that they are subject to a grand jury investigation is the prosecutor receives a criminal case for referral from the local law enforcement agency. The prosecutor develops proposed charges and sends the target of the investigation what's called a target letter. And the target letter contains the charges proposed, the date of incident of when they think that these things occurred, and the date and time of the grand jury presentation. And grand juries are 12 people, 10 of whom need to agree in order to true bill an indictment. The proceedings are managed by a prosecutor who is to remain as neutral as possible. They are an aid to the grand jury. They are not there to be argumentative. They are just there to present the witnesses and the testimony and let the grand jury decide. If the grand jury agrees with the charges, they issue what's called a true bill, and that person is then formally charged by indictment. If they decline to prosecute, they issue a no bill, and that entire record gets sealed.
It goes away.
I think the courts maintain it for some period of time, I think 7 years, but in essence, they were never being investigated at all. And so a lot of times you'll hear that somebody was charged by the police and then nothing ever happens, right? And you're like, well, why? It could be that the case was presented to the grand jury and they were no-billed because there is no public record of the charges or of the proceedings.
Right.
So they are recorded so that if they are true-billed, the defense attorney can challenge it, but the defense attorneys are not privy to the proceedings. So they don't know who testifies. They don't know who's there. Their client can speak, but they cannot aid their client. They can only sit there with their client.
And they can only sit there when the client is speaking.
Correct.
And then everybody has to leave whenever the other witnesses are there,
Correct.
right? Okay.
And they can't advise their client. They can't
There's no
question their
discovery.
client.
There's none of
nothing.
that. Okay. All right. So...
My recollection is that she was a target of the grand jury.
Okay.
Because this was in 2002, which would have been well after he was indicted, after Diaizien Hossencofft was indicted. So my memory is that she was the target of the grand jury to determine whether or not she had had anything to do with
the murder.
Now, New Mexico does not recognize, there's no conspiracy after the fact charges. There's no aiding and abetting after the fact. So,
really?
Right.
Huh. Interesting.
Right.
Why?
Well, This is very similar to why there are no charges of harboring a fugitive when that fugitive is your family member. So it goes back to kind of the Wild West. And if you recall, Michael Astorga was being harbored by his mom.
Yeah.
And so she never got charged because you can't harbor or aid a felon after the fact if you're a family.
Because that's where they live, technically, or something.
Well, because you don't want to have such divided. We expect mamas to protect their
it's such a New
their
Mexican
hitos.
thing.
It's so New Mexican. remember her, Teresa Astorga. All 3 of her sons are in prison for murder. So that ended well for her. But so that's my guess why there's no like aiding and abetting after the fact.
All right, so Felisa is...
My memory was the target of
grand jury. Because of her relationship, because she had been seen making out with him in the holding or in the attorney-client room or whatever on video. So it's funny because it's not funny, but it's interesting. In Mark's book,
dark humor funny.
Yeah, in Mark's book, he talks about all of these weird things about how Felisa was believing in the youth serum.
Really?
Oh yeah, she was all about it.
That doesn't surprise me. One iota, particularly given the way she died.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, she completely fell for Diaizien's charm, for his story, for his everything, and was 100% behind him, going to support him, going to do whatever she could to help him out, because it seemed like she might have been in love with him as well. At least the way that Mark told the story.
Yeah. I mean... What other explanation is there?
Yeah.
Right? But it's so weird because she had this very vibrant life by outward appearances. But this is so interesting because one of the reasons why I quit was because, okay, so shortly after I start working there, the day spa goes under.
Okay.
And then my paychecks start bouncing.
What?
Yes. And then, there was rumor, I don't even remember with whom, like I wasn't gossiping really at work because there were not very many of us, but there was a rumor that she had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt and that she was crumbling under the debt.
It's interesting because I know that his treatments were very expensive when he provided them, and he would invoice line item detail, multiple line items of at least $200 per thing that he itemized. And so some of these invoices could be $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 that he would invoice people,
Wow.
especially if he thought they had money.
So where was he doing this? Out of his home?
He would come to people, to their house or wherever they were, and give them injections of B6 and say that was their youth serum, and they'd be feeling good.
I'm wearing a B12 patch right now.
Yeah, I'm sure you feel great.
I mean,
energy.
Not really, because I have a dark...
you should get some injections.
Yeah, but I have a dark heart, dark soul, a black soul, so...
But, I'm sure you would have some positive effects from being injected with vitamin B.
Absolutely. That is crazy.
Yeah.
What is so crazy to me about this story and about every crazy story in New Mexico is that you tell them to people who are not from here, or even you were like, is this guy Mark? How does he, this is crazy. It can't possibly be true, but they're all true.
Yeah. Well, and then you have a moment where you're like, well, no, that makes sense.
New Mexico is so fucked up. I think part of the reason why I stay here is because it's so fucked up. I quit.
You quit
because
your checks are bouncing.
My checks were bouncing. The day spa.
You're not getting massages.
I'm not getting massages with or without happy endings. Like, it just wasn't working out for me. And judges around the courthouse. Actually, one, she was a hearing officer. She's dead. Her name was Mira Gonzalez, and she was a wonderful soul. And because Felisa had other problems.
Obviously.
Yeah. And this hearing officer said, Edna, I really respect your dad. You don't know me, but you have a great future as a lawyer. And in this job, we only have our reputations, and your reputation is going down the tubes if you continue to work for her. And so I quit. And so, I don't think she was, I mean, who knows if she was surprised. I mean, I had so many weird things happen when I was there that I was glad to be sort of free of that. Like, have you ever been around somebody who by all outward appearances is pretty normal, but the more you talk to them, the more it becomes clear that not only are they crazy, but that every atom that is in their orbit is crazy. And so everything is just sort of vibrating with this just crazy fucking energy, Yeah. And she was like that. She had a lot of energy. So you were like, oh, energy.
It's the vitamin B6.
It's the
wow. This whole thing is just insane. And I can't believe that you have a connection to it like this. Working for his divorce attorney, that's just mind-blowing.
I didn't realize that it was going on. I mean, not just the investigation into her. I thought that was all much. I thought that was all after the fact,
like it had happened years ago,
or a year or two ago.
Yeah.
I didn't realize that his case and Linda Henning's case were going on at that same time. Oh, and. Oh my goodness. Have you seen pictures of Diaizien Hossencofft? So
they're on my website.
They are.
Yeah.
I should see. I'm not subscribed. I should go look. So I remember Felisa telling me a story about how she was visiting him in jail and he would grow his fingernails really long and he would like cut vegetables. So maybe I don't have that much dish, but
no, that's we were able to talk about this part of the case that I didn't cover, mostly because it's batshit crazy. And I already feel like the whole case is crazy enough anyway without all of this stuff. But, I never got into the part that his divorce attorney was actively involved in all of this stuff.
Yes.
And, it's just, so she's dead now.
Yes.
And do you want to talk about that?
Sure.
Okay.
So, her firm, the Garcia Kelly and Associates firm, went away. It's been renamed. It's a different firm. I won't name them.
It's different people. So yeah,
it's different people.
They had nothing to do with it.
They worked with her years later, and I left family practice for the most part, and a number of years later, I became a prosecutor, and that's when people would sort of ask me about, was she really crazy, or and I would say, well, she would tell me she knew where the body was, so to me that makes you crazy. But and let me just point out that back then there was no rule of professional conduct for lawyers that you not sleep with your clients. So while it was unwise, you were ethically permitted to sleep with your clients. That only became a rule recently. So
as much as I love New Mexico, and I love New Mexico, but it's backwards.
It's so backwards. And I think a lot of that was because people were like, well, in a small town, you might need your husband to represent you or your brother. I don't know.
Well, I could definitely understand that, being from Socorro. Either the person in front of you is your cousin or they're related to your cousin. So that's typically
right. They didn't want to put such strict boundaries on the attorney-client relationship. So,
oh my God.
So some years ago, and I don't know the year, there was a double homicide of a real estate couple whose first names I can't remember, but their last name was Olamacher. And the suspect in that case was a guy by the name of Ronald Santiago. And this was a high-profile case for a lot of different reasons, mainly because the Olamachers were real estate agents, and they were sort of the perfect victim in terms of not being drug dealers, not being domestic violence victims, not being gang members, right? Like
upstanding
they were
members of society.
Truly innocent.
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly the accusations, except that Ronald Santiago was accused of killing them. And he was married to Felisa Garcia.
When this happened? Or after?
I'm not sure, but I think after.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he was acquitted of the double homicide, which a lot of people in the DA's office did not feel good about. Lawyers were trained to respect a jury, but there was always still this sentiment that he had done it. Nonetheless, he was free. And some time after the acquittal, Felisa had gone down to El Paso and I think Juarez to get gastric bypass surgery.
As you do.
As you do when the youth serum provider has ceased providing said youth serum. And she apparently went through the surgery just fine and died in her room after with just Mr. Santiago present. And her family, if memory serves, reached out to, I believe, the APD homicide detectives who had investigated the Olamacher homicides because there were some rumors that Ronald and Felisa had some kind of an argument about the acquittal.
Well, she certainly has a type.
Yes.
Wow.
And she has like 4 children, 5 children, girls.
Poor things.
Mm-hmm. And their father is a well-known photographer in town.
We'll just leave that there.
We'll just leave that there. So she's gone. So whatever she
might have known is gone.
About
yeah.
any of these 2 fellows.
I remember Linda saying that she ate Girly, and that's horrifying to think about, but they haven't found Girly. I mean, that's not saying much. New Mexico is huge. There's a lot of open space, but they did look everywhere where the clothing and everything was found. There was some significant investigation into it.
How remote is that area?
It's pretty remote, yeah.
So digging through the sand out there would have been futile.
Right.
Yeah.
And who's to say that that's where her body was anyway? I mean, there's so many, they could have went to Daddle or Pie Town or the VLA or anywhere else.
Yeah.
To bury her if they wanted to. And
I mean, I can't imagine that you could eat a whole
person.
Yeah. Because they only believed in eating the adrenal gland. Is that
the blood? So the blood had to be infused with the serum from the adrenal glands, and that came from being completely terrified.
I mean, I have nightmares about being chased. That's like one of my recurring dreams, and so I don't remember knowing those facts. I knew about Linda Henning, but I don't remember the third fellow.
Oh, Miller.
Yes.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't remember knowing about, but I must have known about the Magdalena connection. I do remember the cat hair because wasn't there some criminalistics done on the cat hair to compare it to Linda Henning's cat?
And Bill's.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
which is really remarkable.
Yeah, and the rabbit fur that was dyed pink, which was what he used, and the deer hair, which is what he used for his fly lures that he made. It was the same dye, it was the same color.
In criminal law, there are cases that have nothing, and there are cases that have everything. And people think that if a case has everything, that it is a slam dunk. But it is not. Because I think that had Diaizien Hossencofft gone to trial, this is New Mexico. He could have won.
Oh, yeah.
So I've always thought it was bizarre that he didn't go to trial, or that he pled.
It's interesting that you say that because there's so much outrage when it comes to plea deals.
Right.
From the public, they get really angry. You look at Michelle Martins and Jessica Kelly and the plea deals that they got, there's a lot of outrage and anger about that. A lot of belief that they should have gone to trial. And it's interesting that you say, like, those aren't always a slam dunk. Like, if you're counting on the jury, you may not win.
Well, and the facts of Girly's homicide are so bizarre and so terrifying that jurors, in order to protect their own psyches from the evilness that they are encountering, will convince themselves that there's no possible way that such a horrific thing happened because to admit that, to come to sit in a courtroom day after day with Diaizien Hossencofft would be too much. And juries have acquitted.
Yeah. Well, and you talked about that with my case, with my brother's case. You know, that a lot of times people will dismiss some of the more horrible details of a case to make themselves feel better.
Right. Just in terms of like going to the grocery store, because you don't want to think that that you're standing in line with some homely schmo like Linda Henning who ate somebody.
Right. She was a model.
Wow. My memory of her pictures are not.
Well, her like when she's in jail, she doesn't look great.
Nobody looks great in jail. Yeah.
She didn't have her hairstylist. She didn't have her, her makeup and all that stuff. So, anything else you want to add before we wrap this interview up?
Well, I just want to say that, like all things in New Mexico, these stories are true. And trust your instincts, right? Like if some guy comes home with a baby and is like, hey, accept this baby, like,
Or if you're offered a job with massages as a benefit, maybe second guess that for a second.
Even if it's at the strip club.
I would say especially.
Especially if it's the strip club. No, it's true. I mean, but those are some of the more, Felisa Garcia Kelly was, I don't want to say a mistake in my life because that experience, and I only worked for her for 8 months or something like that, but it's really given a lot of interest in my life, like that intersection between like New Mexico craziness and life craziness, hope, all those things. Well,
and it's I'm just thinking about the fact that New Mexico and Albuquerque in particular, it's not very big, right? We're not a Chicago, we're not in LA, we're not New York. So I imagine that the community of lawyers is also not very big, and you probably know pretty much everybody, and you've interacted with them on some level. So I imagine that word gets around pretty quickly about what's happening in those situations, especially when something like that is happening.
Yeah, I mean, and I was a brand new lawyer, and I was horrified by her behavior. Like, can't imagine anybody thought that was normal
or okay.
Yeah, well, yeah, they might have, but at the same time, they might have been like, "Yeah, this is New Mexico."
That's how we do things around here.
I just want to add one more thing that that I've heard that one of the business cards that fellow was eating was to a psychic.
Yeah. So that psychic was very involved in the case.
Right.
She even testified in one of the trials because of how much information Bill Miller gave her about what was happening in the case.
Has anybody ever been able to find the jurors to figure out why he was acquitted?
Could be some good homework, though.
Jurors are actually very protected. And the courts, as a prosecutor, when you impaneled a jury, you were required by law to shred their names and information once the case was closed.
And it's been so long, they probably wouldn't remember anyway, so...
The juror?
The prosecutor.
Right.
The juror probably remembers all of it because it's insane. It'd be interesting. If you're a juror on this case and you want to tell your story, you can reach out to me.
I think you should really seek to talk to jurors because I'll never get to be on a jury, and what a treat.
Yeah, I'd probably learn a lot. It'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that was a crazy addition to the crazy story that we told last week.
Well, once again, my deep gratitude towards you. You have a lot of energy, but you don't have crazy energy. You have delightful, just wonderful human being in this world. And given COVID and everything that everybody's going through, it's just such a great gift to have you here. So
I'm in your ears. Well, thank you. And thanks for listening. And don't forget to follow me on social media and subscribe to the podcast on your favorite podcatcher. Leave me a 5-star review if you like the show. If you don't like the show, maybe find another show that works for you. Or if you have constructive criticism, I'm always open to that. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/trueconsequences or ko-fi/trueconsequences. Thanks for listening and stay safe, New Mexico. Thanks for listening to True Consequences. Follow me on Facebook and Instagram at True Consequences Pod and on Twitter at TrueConsPod. True Consequences is listener supported. If you'd like to support this one-man show, please go to patreon.com/trueconsequences. Thanks for listening and stay safe, New Mexico.